Very good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen in the auditorium. Thank you for being here, despite the not so good weather outside. We also have, I think, close to 200 members on the Zoom platform watching this live. Welcome to all of you as well from around the region. Today, we are going to have the last dialogues of this aging series. Yeah, for those of you who have come to our previous session before, right, you know that this is the concluding talk today. Before we begin, I'd like to ask all of you to turn your mobile phone to silent mode. The flow of today's talk is going to be, we're going to have each of our two speakers to speak for 20 to 25 minutes. We have Dr. Soin here with us, and we also have Professor Cheung. Later, our moderator will introduce him. He's going to be on Zoom because he's now in the UK. After the two speakers presented, we will have about 20 to 30 minutes of Q&A time. So you can ask your questions then. Please keep your questions to the end. And for those of you who are online on Zoom, you can also type your questions on the Zoom Q&A section. We will pick the interesting question to help you ask our speakers. For those of you who are new to the HEAD Foundation, let me just quickly introduce ourselves. I'm C.D. Liang. I work for the foundation. The HEAD Foundation was founded in Singapore about 10 years ago. We are a non-profit organization with the mission of improving life in Asia. So what we do is we provide grants to NGOs to work on healthcare and education projects in the region. We also try to create awareness and bring attention to important social issues through our publications as well as a public event like this. We believe there are things that, if we understand better, we know better, we can do something about it and improve the lives of everyone in the region. And as you all know, aging population is an issue in many of our society, especially in Asian societies, because better healthcare, better medical facilities are helping us to live longer, right? But it's also important to live well while we live longer, right? As the society becomes older, there are new issues that we need to work on, we need to deal with. And that is why we organize this series of talk on aging to try to look at some of these issues and bring in experts from healthcare, from the medical field, and even philosopher, right, to see how we can look at the issue of aging. So we have our first dialogue in the series to look at the mental aspect of aging. The second one was on the physical aspect of aging. And then we look at how we can be better prepared about aging. And last week, we had a talk on how traditional medicine can help us to age better. Right? Today, I believe our series, The Art, Science, and Good News of Aging, has come to our final talk, which is, the philosophy of aging, right? Because we believe whether it's sadness or happiness has a lot to do with our mindset and our attitude, right? So today we have two very knowledgeable and experienced speakers to talk about how to look at aging from a philosophical point of view, right? How we can have the correct mindset and attitude towards aging. Before I let the moderator, Dr. Maleena, to introduce our speakers, I'd like to give you a bit of background of Dr. Maleena. Dr. Maleena is the Chief Wellbeing Officer of National University Health System. We know that we have a lot of very capable healthcare workers, doctors, nurses in Singapore. They take care of our patients, especially during the COVID period. But Dr. Maleena is the one, together with her team, to take care of these doctors and healthcare workers, their well-being. So she's playing a very important role in the healthcare system. She was trained as a food scientist. She also has an MBA degree from the top business school in France. And she has a doctorate degree in education. She has worked in 6 or 7 countries. She speaks 6 or 7 languages. So she is definitely a very capable moderator for this series. For those of you who have attended the previous one before, you will know. Without further ado, let me invite Dr. Maleena to introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CD. Can everyone hear me clearly? Thank you. Thank you, CD, Chanda, the entire team at HEAD for all the preparatory work and the communications that you've done, without which none of this would be possible. Today's topic is about the philosophy of aging, and I'm privileged to have 2 speakers, Dr. Soin and Dr. Cheung, Prof Cheung, not doctor, with us today. For the flow of today's event, I will be presenting both speakers in one go. So in this hybrid event, it's a little bit easier so that it's not so choppy. So Dr. Kanwaljit Soin is a well-respected, nothing less, orthopedic and hand surgeon. So if any of you want to have any advice about your hands, please do so, yeah? She's also a former and Singapore's first female nominated Member of Parliament from 1992 to 1996. Dr. Soin was inducted into the Singapore Women's Hall of Fame in 2014, is actively involved in welfare and advocacy organizations. In a way, she's my mentor. She became a founding member of the Association of Women for Action and Research, otherwise known as AWARE, in 1985 and was AWARE's president between 1991 and 1993. Her other credentials include being the founding chair of the Singapore chapter of the United Nations Development Fund for Women and the founding president of Women's Initiative for Aging Successfully. So she's very well placed. The acronym is a nice one called WINGS. Dr. Soin has received accolades such as the Singapore Medical Association Merit Award, Singapore's Woman of the Year, the International Women's Forum's Women Who Make a Difference Award, and a UNIFEM Lifetime Achievement Award. She's the author of Silver Shades of Grey, Memos for Successful Aging in the 21st Century. I've got a copy in my living room if anyone wants to borrow. Now onward to Prof Cheung. He obtained his Bachelor of Arts and Masters in Philosophy degrees from the Chinese University of Hong Kong and Doctor of Philosophy from Freiburg University, Germany. Very, very conversant in German. His research interests include death and happiness, phenomenology, the philosophy of love, theories of general education, and more. Before Prof Cheung retired from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and that was in 2012, so about 10 years ago, he was professor and former chairman of the Department of Philosophy. Prof Cheung is also a prolific author. His most recent publications are Hong Kong in Crisis, this is edited in Chinese, Educated to be Human, Essays on the Humanities, Philosophy and General Education, also in Chinese, Proximity and Distance and Phenomenology, I'll have to practice that word, of Photography, that was published in 2019. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor over to Dr. Soin.
Good afternoon, everybody. Am I all right? Okay. First, thank you very very much to the Hate Foundation for inviting me to speak on aging. It's a favorite subject of mine. And thanks to Maleena for being such a gracious moderator. But a special thank you to you, dear audience, for your interest in aging. It is such an important subject for everyone, for people, for policymakers, and for businesses. Now, who wants to live to be 100? Please raise your hands. All right. Now, who wants to live to be 100 and be in the pink of health? Please raise your hands. Okay. It just shows that we want to live long if we are healthy. Now, I've learned from Professor Cheung that for the ancient Chinese, there was no interest in immortality of the soul or a paradise after death. Instead, prolongation of life was preferred by both the emperors and the Taoists. I would like to think that my philosophy on aging gels with that of the ancient Chinese. I want to live as long as possible, but in a healthy state, as the rest of you. That is why I've entitled my talk, Can We Live Longer but Stay Younger? By younger, I mean staying healthy in the physical, cognitive, and emotional sense, the physical, mental, and social well-being domains. I think this is possible because we do have some control over many aspects of our health and our life. We need both motivation and the right mindset, as CD pointed out, to live longer and stay younger, and at the same time, experience wisdom and joy in this longer life. Before we go there, let us look at a few facts on aging. We are truly living in an aging world. For most of us who are taking part in this webinar, we will live to our 80s and 90s and even beyond. Longevity was once the privilege of the few, but has now become the destiny of many. There are more than 1,500 centenarians alive today in Singapore and still counting. Our life expectancy is 88 for women in Singapore, about 6 years longer than men. 1 in 6 people in Singapore is now over the age of 65, and this will become 1 in 4 in 2030. In ASEAN, the longest life expectancy is in Singapore, but Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Brunei are just behind. Life expectancy has been increasing by 2.5 years every decade. That is about 3 months increase each year. Daily life expectancy is increasing by 4 hours every day. And while we are taking part in this event, our life will be extended by quite a few minutes. So if we are not looking at longevity, we are not looking at the future. In 2016, Singapore was ranked 3rd in the world for the longest average life expectancy and 2nd in the world for the longest average healthy life expectancy. Not only are we living longer, but we are also living healthier longer. Therefore, we cannot equate chronological age with biological age. I was born in 1942, and so chronologically, I'm 80 years old. But does that mean that 80 is also my biological age? The passage of time is relentless and unstoppable, and so we cannot slow down our chronological age. We cannot change our birth certificate age, but we can slow down our biological age and continue to feel young as we grow older. 70 is the new 50, and this attitude signifies the momentous revolution that has taken place in healthy longevity. Only 20% of our longevity and health in old age is genetically determined. The remaining 80% is based on our lifestyle, socio-economic factors, and the environment. If we are lucky and diligent, we can control many of these determinants of healthy longevity. Now let us look at the diseases that cause us to die in old age. These are the age-related chronic diseases, namely cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, chronic respiratory disease, and neurodegenerative conditions. Our current approach is to treat each disease as it appears. For example, we treat heart disease if it appears first, and the patient can then continue with life until the next disease appears. For example, cancer. And then we treat cancer, and so on. And the process is repeated until failure, when the patient dies. Many scientists think that this approach is the wrong way to proceed. Instead of treating one disease at a time, we should preventatively target the root cause of all these chronic diseases. It is the process of aging that leads to these diseases. And so if we can target aging itself and slow it down, this will delay the appearance of all the chronic diseases, and we could then truly expand people's lifespans and health spans. Therefore, experts who study aging say it is time to take a fresh look at the biological process of aging and recognize that this is a condition that can be delayed and possibly reversed. So, what is aging? Aging is the result of a time-dependent adaptation to 9 hallmarks of aging, which ultimately becomes maladapted and leads to self-elimination. These hallmarks of aging include genomic instability, epigenetic changes, telomere shortening, mitochondrial dysfunction, loss of proteostasis, altered intercellular communication, deregulated nutrient sensing, cellular senescence, and stem cell exhaustion. We don't have to remember it, but just to elaborate on what are the causes of aging. Now, aging can be slowed down by manipulating these hallmarks of aging at the cellular and molecular level. This concept strongly suggests that aging is random and purposeless, at least from the scientific point of view. Contrary to what most people think, there is no biological law that says we must age. Both drugs and lifestyle changes act on this biological process of aging through one or more of the 9 hallmarks just mentioned. In addition, genetic engineering is becoming a reality. These technologies being developed won't just give us extra years of life, they will give us extra years of youth. Our bodies can be kept biologically younger for longer, regardless of our chronological age. While we wait for the scientists to figure out aging further, there are some simple changes that we can make to slow down aging. And we have to look at the 3 aspects of our life: our physical body, our cognition, and our emotional aspect. All feed into each other and augment each other. To enable us to do this, we must not overlook some natural advantages of growing older, and we should optimize these. All these work through the 9 hallmarks of aging I mentioned earlier. 1, we must stop clinging to the prevailing belief that old age is synonymous with dependency, disease, dementia, and decrepitude, all the D words leading to death. Our attitude towards aging determines how we can stay young as we grow older. Now, just close your eyes. Imagine for a moment you didn't know how old you are and you have no birth certificate or passport. Can you look within yourself and see how old you feel? Well, keep it the number. Now, most people feel about 8 years younger than their actual chronological age. But some people feel that they have aged, and the consequences are serious. So research has shown that feeling 8 and 13 years older than your actual age resulted in a greater disease burden and earlier mortality, even when you control for other demographic factors such as education, race, or marital status. Your subjective age can better predict your health than the date on your birth certificate. Sorry. In a study led by Professor Becca Levy and stretching over 23 years, older adults who reported more positive self-perceptions of aging, they felt worthy, happy, and hopeful, they lived 7.5 years longer than older adults with more negative self-perceptions of aging. So even if you make no other change in your life, whether it's exercise, nutrition, or whatever it is, by making sure that you have a positive self-perception of aging can make you live 7.5 years longer and younger probably. In 2015, research led by the Yale School of Public Health demonstrated that individuals who hold negative beliefs about aging are more likely to have brain changes associated with Alzheimer's disease. Very fortuitously, this study suggests that combating negative beliefs about aging could potentially offer a way to reduce the rapidly rising rate of Alzheimer's disease. This is the first study to link brain changes in Alzheimer's disease to a culturally based psychosocial risk factor. It is so vital that we do not internalize the negative perceptions of aging and allow them to become self-fulfilling prophecies. In Singapore, 1 in 10 people over the age of 60 gets dementia, and this rises to 1 in 2 after the age of 85. Therefore, I think it's very important for us and our policymakers to ensure that we do not allow ageism to flourish in society, and we work towards an age-integrated society. Ageism could be one of the most important factors to consider in health policy. 2, it has been found that people get smarter and more creative as they get older. And that should make us feel happy and hopeful. Cognitive studies show that intelligence does not inevitably decline in older persons. The 𝗙𝗃𝗁𝗃𝗁 theory is widely regarded as the most influential theory in the study of human intelligence. According to this theory, there are basically 2 types of intelligence, fluid and crystallized. Fluid intelligence enables us to learn and process new information quickly, like remembering someone's phone number. While crystallized intelligence refers to the usage of accumulated knowledge and experience in decision-making and in other areas of mental activities. Both types of intelligence are important in everyday life and complement each other. Many studies have demonstrated that fluid intelligence peaks in early adulthood and then declines gradually after that. Crystallized intelligence, however, continues to improve as individuals age. The aging brain scores better on tests of crystallized intelligence as compared to young brains. Of course, not on fluid intelligence. And also, creativity is associated with crystallized intelligence. 3, people become happier and more contented in old age. We are happy in childhood, but from the age of around 18, we gradually start to become less happy. And this reaches its lowest point in the early 40s and early 50s. However, the happiness curve is U-shaped. And as we head into our mid-50s, the levels of this emotion take off again. And then when we are in our 60s and beyond, we are happy and contented. Happiness doesn't just make people happy, it also makes them healthier and more productive. According to a noted author, number 4, according to a noted author and physician, Dr. Christiane Northrup, 50 marks the beginning of the best years of our lives, including the best sex of our lives. She observed that midlife can be a time of unmatched sexual expression and emotional fulfillment. Studies have shown frequent sex and intimacy prolong life and enhance health. And this happens through the increased length of telomeres. Some middle-aged and older women sometimes feel disinclined to have sex after menopause. My advice to them is to follow the slogan of Nike, just do it. Sex and intimacy are good for you and might prolong your youth and your life. Number 5, change our dietary habits. An Egyptian pyramid inscription from around 3800 BC reads, humans live on 1/4 of what they eat. On the other 3/4 lives their doctor, warning us about overeating. Calorie restriction and intermittent fasting are 2 possible ways of making us younger. Scientists from the National Institute of Aging believe that the key to a better old age may be to reduce the amount of food on our plates and thus restrict our caloric intake. In Okinawa, for example, the elderly people follow the ancient rule of hara hachibu, eating only until the stomach is 80% full. And this seems to slow aging. Also, we must eat less meat and a more plant-based diet, good for our health and good for the planet. 6, exercise. Is it possible to reverse aging with exercise? The latest evidence is showing that exercise not only strengthens the heart and may trim the waist, but regular physical activity can slow the aging process on a cellular level and potentially add years to life. Exercise also helps our immune system to stay young. Research has revealed that the so-called longevity genes, which control our health and fitness, can be turned on by exercise, caloric restriction, and intermittent fasting. 7, sleep. A University of California team has found that 1 night of partial sleep deprivation in older adults activates genes related to biological aging and suggests that insufficient sleep may increase the risk of chronic disease. Sleep deprivation causes shortening of the telomeres, which is a sign of aging. 8, social connections and purpose in life. It is now well accepted that a sense of social connection helps to reduce the effects of stress, whilst the responsibility of maintaining those friendships encourages greater overall mental, and physical activity. Older age also brings about feelings of generativity. Generativity means a concern for establishing and guiding the next generation, and it serves as fuel for many who are looking to leave a legacy. What matters is living with a purpose. Professor Cheung is the expert on this subject, and I'm sure he's going to elaborate on it. A growing body of evidence suggests that living with purpose may help us to live longer. This was the focus of a recent study at Boston University School of Public Health. According to the results, having a purpose lowers the risk of all causes of mortality, regardless of gender, race, or ethnicity, but the effects were more pronounced among women. So now we have looked at 8 ways that can help us to become biologically young, even as the clock ticks on. In summary, have good friends, keep busy, and every day try to be a little hungry and a little breathless. Age is a perspective and not a number. A positive perspective on aging adds years to your life and life to your years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soin. Perfect timing as well. So I'll hand the floor over to Prof Cheung, who will pursue the topic of philosophy and aging. Thank you, Prof Cheung.
Hello, can you hear me?
Well and clear.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I must thank CD from the Head Foundation to invite me to be here to share some of my thoughts about aging with all of you. And also thank you, Dr. Maleena, to introducing me. And most of all, I must thank Dr. Soin for her wonderful speech. I think after hearing her speech, I think I just have nothing to say anymore, because hearing from her 8 points, I think that we know how to live longer and live healthier and live happier. And especially when I look at her, I don't think people will believe her as already 80 years old. I think she is, of course, already a good example to be live longer, healthier, younger. Compared with her, I'm a little bit younger. This year I'm just over 73. But I think that what I'm going to say about philosophy, and also I'm so honored to be the last one to speak. Perhaps is about the science and knowledge about to help us not to be so growing old, and read a little bit more, just a little bit more to know what I'm going to think about aging in philosophy. And my topic is about the philosophy of aging. And I must say that philosophy of aging is a very young subject in philosophy, even though we know in the past nearly 50 years in the field of medicine and science, and a lot of work being done on this topic. But so why we need philosophy? So of course, philosophy is something, a word that is sometimes is so scary, the people. Then philosophy must be the high sounding, and then talk about theory, abstract things, and then when talk about philosophy, people will regard it as a very complicating subjects. But I don't think so. When we look at philosophy, of course, we look at a philosopher, right? And when the pictures like in Plato and Aristotle, and in Chinese, there's Confucius. My understanding is that of course, philosophy not just to know how Plato or Confucius, nearly 25 centuries ago, found a way of coping life in Athens or China, but to find a way of understanding and enjoying life better as contemporaries of the internet, credit cards, iPhone, and Marvel movies. So the purpose is, I think philosophy is a way of life. In fact, unlike a lot of the so academics in philosophy in universities, people that more believe that philosophy is never only a subject in university. It not only the professor of philosophy know philosophy, but in ancient times, and especially the Greeks think that philosophy is a way of life. And Epicurus said that philosophy is something to help people to live better. And just like medicine is to help people to save to help keep the body healthy. So philosophy must help the soul healthy. So that I think that this is the way of life and of actually as of living and aging and dying. In fact, what I think is living, aging, and dying is a process, the same process, but from different perspective. Of course, just like what Dr. Soin has already said, is also one Greek saying from the Greek philosopher Socrates, the really important thing is not to live, but to live well. And to live well meant, along with other enjoyable things in life, to live according to your principles. What kind of principles? Of course, definitely, we are not going to live as just a happy, fat dog, but like in the painting is Socrates. There's a great painting from the French painter who draw the last scene of Socrates before his death. He's taking his poison, and is ordered to be execution. But I think he takes his own suicide, the poison. People say that there are two deaths in the Western civilization that are great importance. One is Jesus, but Jesus is a God, but he died like a man because he suffered on the cross. But they say another one is like Socrates. People say, philosophers said, he's a man, but he died as a saint because when he died, he said, my soul is being clean, and his glad when he died in a happy state because he have done nothing bad. And also one of this one important sentence quotation from him is that where this is so-called an exemplary life is not worth living. He asked people not just to live, but to think about his own life, about his life relation to people, to the society. So what I understand is that aging is not just a problem of medicine, economic, and social welfare. Up till now, I think Dr. Soin just demonstrated what the past scientific research, the medical research had done to this problem of aging. Probably people think that aging is in fact it's just a disease, and the disease can be healed, can be cured, as long as we know how our body works and we know how the aging process stops. Maybe one day we no longer age, and in fact, at this time, maybe that is already we come to a stage of immortality, that we are not going to die, because even death is still can be considered as a disease, not an inevitability. And of course, aging is also an economic problem because there's so many old people. Then we have to deal with the pensions and all is a big cost to the society, and also the social welfare about how the well-being and taking care of old people and all these things. But what I think is that one more problem is that aging is also an existential problem for human beings. It's not just for a social problem, not just a universal phenomenon, but for every one of us, every people, everyone must face its own aging, because there's something that is uncovered during this phenomenon of aging, that in the end, life has a limit. In the end, we have to die. It's something that is an important problem for us. So there's one very young new recent book about 10 years ago. This lady wrote a very interesting book on the long life, and her saying that understand old age, we have to think more fundamentally about what it means to be a person, to have a life, to a good life, and to be part of a just society. Because all this problem, what it meant to be a person, to have a life, good life, it's not a medical problem. It's not just an economic problem. It's not social problem at all. But basically, they are all philosophical problems. My understanding, of course, there are a lot of theory about the phases of life and other the different ages of life. But in my research and my observation, I think that we can develop a theory, a new observation about the phases of life. My concept is not we are not taking life as a chronological order. In fact, people like age 30, it's not 30 years old cannot be a common denominator for all people about age 30 because it's a long of different variation. Some people become the old man when he is only 50, but some people like Dr. Soin, even at the age of 80, just not like 50. So the biological age does not mean anything. My understanding of age is that first, we have the first age. When we are born, then we have come to the first age, where youth, preparation, education. Sometimes the first age will stop at the age of 15 and we have to go out to work. But sometimes this is a preparation for life, for the second age. We come a little bit later. For example, I become independent only after I get my PhD and then how to work myself. So I begin my so-called my second age as age of 32, 31, I think. So this age, this period of time, then we're going to have the maturity, going to a career building, and then we have family, and then we are parenting, and all this. This age also have no limit. There's nothing to say that we have to stop the age at the age of 50 or 70 or 80. Sometimes people will never finish this so-called second age. But then, importantly, I think we come to the third age. I think now we said about third age is more relevant to what our problem is that suddenly we realize that we're going to retire. Suddenly we know that our children has grown up, they get married, and then suddenly we realize that we become grandparents. Then suddenly we are not going to the office every day. Then we become retired. That means that our proactive life, our active working life are over. Then we enter into my understanding the third age. That is a time that we have apparently a lot of time, a lot of freedom, a lot of things to do. But this third age is exactly a time, I think, the age that we are coming to look at, because only in this age, we know that the problem of aging becomes an important problem. So because one does know that, how long will it last? Sometimes people last for 10 years, 15 years, 30 years after his retirement. Then then we come to the third age. Then they come to the third age that are morbidity and mortality. Then we become dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and gradually our body and our mind fails us. And then we know that when this third, fourth age come, then our life also ends. So the important is that for our concern is the third age. because it's a time that we are aware of our age and are aware of the withering of our body and our decline of our mind. And that's why when Dr. Soin, the oral recommendation is, in fact, is to contribute how we are doing in the third age. And I said, the age is not biologically, it's not chronologically limit. So the important thing is our third age, our old age, our aging. Of course, I attend an exhibition some years ago in London. There's an interesting that it's actually all the robots, all old people coming on together, but it doesn't matter. But in fact, a lot of people, so many people think old age is a kind of illness, liability, dementia, uselessness, ugliness, loneliness, nuisance, social waste. But of course, what we have been listening to a lot of other scientists and experts saying that in this, I think in this seminar, we come to believe that all this labeling about old age may not be true. We can be the medical support us, and then our social system, economic system, then we can have a better third age. But looking at our past, when we look at our philosophy, aging, unlike death, had never been an important theme for philosophy. Because death is certainty. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Socrates is mortal. All men are mortal. I am a human being. I am also mortal. So mortality, I mean, this is a certain. But aging is a contingency. Not everyone lives to be old. That is to say that until the 21st century, people will not get history. The life expectancy of a lot of people very short, and sometimes they die. A lot of people die in the 50s and 80s. Not until today we live longer. As I said, that when I look at my age, I'm already 73. I live already older than Socrates. He died. He died at 70, and also Confucius. He died at 72. I'm already older than they, these wise men in the past. But we know people live longer. And they live longer, but that does not mean that they can be exempted from the last ending that they say all men are mortal. Therefore, when only a few people in society reach old age, and death is a threat of old age, that they will attract more attention than aging. When death becomes one of the most important topic in philosophy, then we have to ask, what is death? What will become of us after death? Is there life after death? Can we attain immortality? And if that is inevitable, then what are we going to do with our own life when still living on Earth? So I think that means that in the past, whether in the Western philosophy tradition or in Chinese, death is always one of the important topic, even in the Taoist, like the 𝗔𝗓ance, or in Confucius. Confucius always say that 𝗔𝗯liche𝘂𝘁𝗁 that we are still going to look at living a life. Why bother about that? So Confucius, the tradition, always stress on the life as a living is more important than death. But in saying so, Confucius still regard there's a limit of this living life. Then we have to die one day or another. In this sense that when we look at before 21st century, in fact, there's only 2 books on the philosophy of certitude as old age. Said, I mean, compared with all the scientific investigation, all the books on aging in science, in philosophy is that we have to come to very, very late, and then we have to catch up. But when look at these two books, still we have some more kind of wisdom coming from that. One is from the Roman philosopher and important man called Cicero, and then there's he wrote a book on, I think it's one of the very first book on old age in year 44, like more than 2,000 years ago. But still, there are a lot of people quoting him, and I'm going to talk a little bit about him later. And also in the last century, is by a very famous female philosopher, 𝗔𝗯cie de Beauvoir, and his coming of age is only after nearly 2,000 years later, and one woman, female philosopher, wrote a book, a big book, in fact, on the coming of age. Now, look at this man, this gentleman is a woman philosopher, politician, lawyer, orator. And when he is at the age of a little bit over 60s, and will retire, and he's no longer a senator, but he wrote a book and about concerning aging, because he wants to give us a consultation to his good friend about how to face aging. So he started saying that there are 4 common charges coming against old age. Is withdraw people from active life, it weakens the physical power, it takes away the capacity of enjoyment, it involves the anticipation of death. And looking at these 4 charges, we know this the first 3, it actually is no longer very valid, because what like Prof Soin has just been telling us, that we can have active life, we still have physical power, we can still have a lot of enjoyment, but only one thing that we have to do is that involve anticipation of death. Look at what he said about this. Of course, it's a big book, and even though it's not very not complicated, I think I can only give us some a little bit the guideline what he dealt about this problem. For example, the one thing about the first charge is that this old age withdrawal from active life, and in Roman time, there's still the age of retirement, even for the Senate. But he said, the old man does not do what the young man do, but he does greater and better things. The counsel, influence, deliberate opinion. He said that we are not the old people, like the people of old, third age, do not like young people. We don't have to do the thing that they are doing. We have active life is not the active physical life. We have much better active mental life. From our experience, we can give counsel, we can give opinions, and we can give some what we have been doing about from our experience to give some so-called wisdom. And secondly, of course, unlike young people, we can no longer go into the football field, when we can no longer have a lot of the heavy physical exercise. But old age does not desire nor require the strength of youth. We must keep our ill health. Is that sometimes our losing of physical power is not because of our old age, just because of our ill health. So he said, ill health which is common to all periods of time. Proper care will greater retard decay. What exactly anticipates what Dr. Soin has been saying more than 2,000 years ago. The third part is that reaching the third age, the old age take away the capacity of enjoyment. Cicero's answer is that someone said about the enjoyment in the young age, to drink better, to have more sex. I think it's not the case, because old age, then we have the kind of control of our own desire, and then we can be feeling them from their endowments. And then we are in old age, we have pleasure more refined and satisfying than those of senses. there's a great distinction between the so-called physical enjoyment and so-called mental enjoyment. For mental enjoyment, certainly, and when we age and we have more experience, we enjoy a lot of things that are not unlike the young people. We enjoy just like friendship, art, music, all these things that because we have more time, and then we don't being sort of being driven by the desire in the young life. So I think what he said is that the kind of take away our capacity of enjoyment exactly is something that we don't know the enjoyment that we can have in the old age. That was exactly also what Dr. Soin has said. Even sex may be better in old age because we are not being driven by the kind of lust, the kind of the greater desire. Then we probably enjoy the kind of intimacy and loving relationship rather than just some physical lust. And finally, when it comes to the great problem about death, Cicero, as a kind of the Stoics, he take a kind of attitude. It's more positive. He said, doesn't matter. By all means, we are going to die, but does that mean that the death that you take away the purpose of life? And he repeat what Socrates said, and also Plato has said, the right aim of life is to live not long, but well. What he's trying to say that even though we have a long life, we are not going to die until the 80, 70. What are we going to do with this time? It's more important than existing as long as we live. We have to know during this time, when they're given that maybe I'm 70 years old, probably before I go into the stage 4, I still have 20 more years to go. The problem is, how are we going to do with this more 20 years? Just time doesn't guarantee a meaningful, happy life. Then we have to do to reflect what is it that we are going to do with this long life. So, and then he, of course, his argument is that people, even though he's unhealthy, because death is always a threat. People are still afraid of death. Therefore, death is still a great taboo in people. And especially among Chinese people, we always think that to say about death is something that is not, it's not good thing, it's not an unlucky thing. But the philosophy keep us saying that we have to face this. It's only the philosophy is going to seek for the truth. And one of the most important truth about life is that we have to die. So the philosopher like Cicero think that we have to take this inevitability of life, death, seriously. Then they have to try to think a way to probably to think in front of death and to dissolve the problem or the fear of death. By doing so, we can live happier without the threat. But look at that, of course, he gave a very important advice. Then there is first in his Latin original. He said, old age will only be respected if it fights for itself, maintain its right, avoids dependence of anyone, and assert control over its own to its last breath. This is this quotation actually been translated many times, and when you look at the recent books about happy aging, this quote has been repeated many times, because what he is saying 2,000 years ago is a way of the positive aging. That we should not just look at the downside of aging. We have to face it squarely, optimistically. But of course, we have to state our own, that is to say, we have to keep our own self intact and to maintain our right, and then hopefully avoid dependence on anyone. Of course, nowadays we think that this is not a correct attitude. In fact, aging need a lot of help and also support from other people, especially from friends and also from other people. So at the end, I think there is a kind of comment. Doesn't matter. That is just a reflection on that. And the important is as a Stoic, he just focus on only oneself rather than living with people. Okay, let us look at the last philosopher that I want to talk a little bit about this. It is the modern the French philosopher, the female philosopher, the 𝗙𝗂𝗓 de Beauvoir. Her saying this, why important is that die young, die early, or grow old. There's no other alternative. Then we said that if you are not to die at a young age, we have to face old age. So old age is something that we cannot be avoided. But he said old age is not necessarily an end to human life. And when look at the last things about this, he said, it is old age rather than death that is to be contrast with life. He said death is not important, but because during old age, we think about the problem of about loss, about anxiety, about the feeling of loneliness, about the failure of meaning of life is important. But in the end, her advice about this that there's only one solution of if old age is not to be a parody of our former life, that is go on pursuing ends that give our existence a meaning, devotion to individuals, to groups or to causes, social, political, intellectual, or creative work. One's life has value so long as one contribute value to the lives of others by means of love, friendship, indignation, and compassion. So therefore, she is something not in line with Cicero. She does not stress on only individuals, but he said a good life, a happy life is not just an individual life, but a social life shared by people and helping people, and compassion in people. So looking to my last thing is that when we are going to face the end of our life, we have to think about what have we done in our own life. Do we have an authentic life? Do we have a meaningful life? All this problem cannot be answered, I think, by just science, but by a kind of reflection in philosophy. Well, I'm trying to say that we have given more time to live, and we are given now more support from the various from science, from medicine, from government. Then we still have a lot of opportunities to open up ourselves. I think one thing that I want to add in the end is that we have to look at the world openly, and there's a lot of beautiful things in nature and in humanity. Let's enjoy life together and enjoy a good old age. So at the end, I think this one just appeal the age, the new books about this, and this is on the evening in Hong Kong. Then I said that one of the things from Confucius that when we are aging happily and we don't know, certainly the aging come in. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof Cheung. I hope you all enjoyed both speakers' interventions today with the contrast as well as similarities, how they overlap in understanding of how we live, how we age, and then that philosophy, hopefully reaching the right old age and then passing on. I couldn't help but be intrigued. If none of you are aware, Cicero lived obviously in Roman times, but his life was curtailed. He was assassinated under the order of Mark Antony at the time. So if you want to live long, also probably not have too many enemies. Yeah. Besides having all the right things and doing the right things. Yeah. So poor man was a statesman, a lawyer. He spoke a lot. So in Italian, when we say il cicerone, that means someone who speaks forever. So that was his thing. Yeah. He was a very good orator. So with that, I leave you, the audience, to ask your questions. We have also the audience online that may have a few questions that will be curated by CD for us. So our speakers, here is your time to interact with our lovely audience. We can pass you the mic in the room as well. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to ask, especially about philosophy, and of course, it's addressed to Dr. Soin also, besides Dr. Cheung. Socrates, he's famous for emphasizing inner harmony over and above external harmony. When he was condemned to die in prison, he was advised by students and friends to escape from prison. He refused. He would rather die and eat poison. Unlike Aristotle, when his life threatened, he ran away for his life. And besides Socrates emphasizing inner harmony, Paul in the New Testament, he was contented whether in plenty or in want, and mentions he had stillness of mind at the age of 40. 庄子, which Dr. Cheung mentioned, he was unmoved whether the whole world praises him or condemned him. And certain Buddhists, they pursue happiness that surpasses all other happiness at whatever price it costs them. And Confucius mentioned that he's lucky if a person can hear of Tao in the morning, he'll be contented to die in the evening. So in all these instances, inner harmony, contentment, stillness of mind, being unmoved, happiness, and to hear Tao, in what ways are they similar and in what ways are they different, that people are willing to die and to pursue at the expense of all other things or happiness? May I have your comments, Dr. Soin and Dr. Cheung? Thank you.
I will leave
Thank you.
Dr. Cheung to answer it, but I will just say, in fact, what Dr. Cheung said, authenticated what Professor Cheung said. If you want to live the authentic life and you want to live by your principles, then you have to do what all these people did. Now, I will leave Professor Cheung to give the real answer.
So thank you for the question. I think it just can cover with the whole range of philosophers. Says I need more than 2 hours to answer. But one thing important, when you look at the happiness, I believe happiness cannot be the gift. You cannot, I give you happiness. No, happiness must be found and to sort by oneself. When you thought about the first point about Socrates, and of course, when you're looking about what you mentioned about this last part is in Phaedo, what Plato has described the last hours of Socrates. Why Socrates died peacefully? Because he is convinced that his soul is purified. And one of the interesting things about in his work is that to philosophize is to prepare how to die. Because when one dies, one's soul is being purified, and then they become they depart the corrupted body and go to the world, to the dream of idols, the dream of immortality. And in this book, Fatal, that is Plato want to prove the immortality of the soul. That means that when you have one principles, you don't be afraid. You're not afraid about death. And what I'm talking about are the other philosophers too, like the Confucius, like the Buddhists. So that's what Dr. Soin has said. Because these people have got their own principle. They can live their own life. Then they have their own this authentic life. Then they are not going to be afraid of death. And also they can live as long happily, I mean meaningfully, because when one have a meaningful life, consequently, he will have a happy life. Then even live meaningfully, that means he also live aging meaningfully and happily. So I think maybe the important thing is that we have to look for a principle for our own self, and not like Cicero has said, we have to maintain oneself. I think by so doing, then we are well equipped. That means that we have to think personally to think about these problems.
Maleena.
Thank you,
I hope
Prof Cheung. That was quite a lot of food for thought amongst the philosophers and how we deal with the concept of aging and dying. A gentleman from the audience would like to ask another question.
May I?
Yes.
Yes, I have some comments and questions. My response thus far is that academia needs to engage grassroots action makers more often. We are very privileged to be here to exchange this information. However, from my perspective as a grassroots volunteer, Silver Generation Ambassador, and in my engagement with people in their 70s and 80s, there is a very big disconnect between ideas and actual executions. Unfortunately, the environment in Singapore has grown to become extremely synthetic. To cut a long story short, yesterday, I had to resign as a volunteer with the 𝗙𝗊𝐼𝐶 because of differences in opinion. And I just find that the various agencies, despite their good intentions, are extremely blinkered in executing. So you have an impression of efficiency, but it's not effective. What is very interesting from my learning from the ground is how does the human being, the aging human being, after a lifetime of accumulating knowledge, wisdom, pass on this to the future generation? This could be an opportunity for us to exploit. There are still many loopholes amongst the various civil and government agencies. How can we cooperate more to enthuse and motivate more people to take affirmative action? Because as I observe from the Singapore and the Johor perspective, I spent half my time in Singapore and half my time in society with more nature and lower human density. The calming effect of the forests and the jungles and plants, it does work. And excessive funds have unfortunately been spent on very expensive medical specialists who dispense solutions which create more problems in the form of side effects. So we need to fundamentally address the aging aspect of the human being, of the human soul. So may I have the comments from perhaps the perspective from Hong Kong, the perspective from professors, because ultimately the bottom line is the execution and the dissemination of ideas, which I find thus far extremely inefficient. Thank you.
I talk first or Professor Cheung?
Yeah, Dr. Soin, would you
Well,
like to go first? It's a whole
Is that all
combination
right,
of.
Professor Cheung? I'll go first. I'll give a short answer. Well, I think you raised some very important points and observations, and I think we can learn from that. Where aging is concerned, and why we don't take the wisdom of the older people is due to the fact of ageism, because we divide society into them and us. You have sexism, you have racism, you have ageism, which is, exactly we pit society. But the funny thing about ageism, unlike the sexism and racism, the funny thing about ageism is that when we discriminate against older people, we are actually discriminating against our older self in the future. So the in-group will one day have to become the out-group, unlike the others. So that is why I cannot understand ageism. It's our own future self. So coming back to, again, I mentioned it because it's that we need an age-integrated society, and where we don't, put older people into aging. These are the elderly aging centers, care homes, and things like that. So, for example, we could have senior centers and student care centers together, so that you have interdependency and support each other. And where older people could go back to some institution and learn with younger people about space, about the new developments in the aging and what is happening. Because that could be ageism is, I think, a very big threat to society in general, and that requires really a separate session. So I will now hand it over to Professor Cheung to say his part.
I just want to add something about Dr. Soin said. I think she exactly said that about ageism is something ridiculous. But at the same time, why ageism becomes so important? Because our society stress on youth. All the commercials are stressed on beauty, staying young, and in contrast to age. But one thing where you are pointing out very importantly, because unlike sexism or racism, we know sexism, I'm a male, and I said that you are female, that's why I'm against you. But ageism different, because you said everyone will age. Those young people pointing finger to the old people, saying that you're old and ugly, but later they also become the same thing. So ageism is wrong just because they are overlooking life as such. Because we have in a sense, like what 𝗙𝗂𝗁𝗂𝗁𝗂 said, either you die young or grow old. Everyone will go old someday. They will have to be. But sometimes at the same time, I said, because our consumerism focus on young people. And I think one thing is encouraging is that I think society to take care of this problem. A lot of work being to try to dissolve the prejudice against ageism. For example, I think I'm now in England. That is ageism is not just like racism is also not a good thing. There's no age discrimination. So we can work as long as they please. I think there's something that we have to do about this. But I think this is my comment. Thank you.
Yes, CD.
Yeah, I think we should give the audience on Zoom opportunity to ask the question. So let me take one question from the online audience. I believe this is from one of our very good friends, Dr. Ronald Ng. Here's a question for Dr. Soin. This is his question. In a recent brief lecture on BBC, Stuart Russell talked about the problem of success. If mankind does succeed in seeing everyone to live to be more than 100, or perhaps reach immortality, what are the problems of the success there, right? If everybody lives to 100 or older.
Well, this problem has been there right from the beginning. In earlier days, when so many people used to die at an early age from infectious diseases, and there were, at the same time, birth rates were so high. And then there was this big book by Malthus who said that the world will come to an end because the population is growing too fast and the planet cannot have these resources. So society is constantly evolving, and human beings can adapt to that. So I don't know whether Dr. Ng means, first of all, fertility rates are falling all over the world. So when we say aging is a problem, per se, aging is not a problem. It's a problem because there are more older people compared to younger people. In Singapore now, there are more people over the age of 65 than under 15. So wrinkles have become more important than pimples. So instead of going into pimple cream, people now can go into wrinkle cream. You see, so there's an opportunity. So I think, what are we worried about? Are we worried that as Professor Cheung mentioned, about pensions? What are we worried about? Hunger? Are we worried about, are there too many older people? But if we can live longer, I'm not talking of immortality. Our lives are already being extended. And if we can live longer and we can live better, we can be more productive. In fact, some scientists have done a study that if you can delay aging by 1 year in America, that means people remain younger for longer, you can save $63 trillion or something like that. So I would like to know, what is the problem? What are the problems that can occur if we live longer in a healthier way? I only see good out of this coming, So I am not pessimistic and dismal about that. And it would be nice, of course, to talk to Dr. Ng face to face. And I'm sure he has a lot of basis for his question.
Thank you very much, Prof. Cheung and Dr. Soin. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Someone from the audience would like a mic. There's one just next to you.
Okay. I'm basically trying to ask questions on guidelines, but it's actually in two different parts. The first part is for the individual, and the second part is for society at large. The first part, of course, we know that Western philosophy has got many threats and themes and so forth. So but my primary concern is how to create and create the greatest personal utility and happiness when people are aging. Which philosophy they should use as a guideline, whether it's Stoicism versus Epicureanism, or from a very existentialist point, existentialism versus absurdism, particularly Sartre versus Camus. So that's for the personal aspect. how, as we are aging, what if there's such a balance or a guideline to age happily with greatest utility. And the second part of the question is very, very much wider. It's on what's the best, for Professor, what's the best philosophy to guide an aging society? Because globally, we're all having an aging society. Does Western philosophy have an answer? Or do you think that Eastern philosophy has an answer? Or has a better grasp? And even if it was so, whether Western or Eastern, what are the limitations to these models and where can we improve? So really guideline questions for the individual as well as society as a whole.
Thank you very much. Prof Cheung, over to you.
It's a big problem, and I don't think that I can give you some simple answer. And in the first question about individuals, I don't think there is philosophy. And one thing about philosophy and the difference between philosophy and religion is that philosophy look up the various perspectives. Unlike religion, when you become a Christian, when you become a Buddhist, you have a definite answer to what to think. But philosophy offer you a lot of answers. The one thing more important thing is about the answer that you think is the only answer, but you have to think through it. I always go to for and the best philosophy is not something not to be given to you, but what can one just seek and reflect for your own self. And you have mentioned about so many things, existentialism and stoicism and also Epicureanism. A lot of this ism, all are relevant and all are not relevant. They are relevant if you are thinking about through your life in the perspective of a Confucianism or Stoicism or Taoism. Do you think some point of the life in congruent with that, you think that this might be my way of life, this might be my meaning, this might be, I think it might be, they're not definite. And for the second problem about the society at large, isn't like first of all, we have to fend off the kind of prejudice that what we are just talking about, the ageism. Ageism something definitely is not the correct attitude. But what is the correct attitude that we have to, I think, we have to look at all four ages, that what I just mentioned about the first age, the growing, and then secondly working, and the third age about the retirement, and the fourth age about our decline seriously. The society must face this all stages seriously, and the society provide the condition, the environment for the individual citizen to grow in protected, in a secure way to live their own life. But where I think the society should not adopt a kind of one kind of philosophy to the guideline. I think this nowadays I still believe in a liberal, democratic, open society. That only in this way we can let people, individuals in society to seek, to look for their own meaning of life and their own meaningful aging. Probably is only, of course, we can talk about it in the more elaborate ways, but definitely we don't have time now.
Thank you, Prof Cheung. Are there any more questions from our audience online, CD?
Yes, there's another, I don't know whether it's simpler, but it's a shorter question. I believe for Prof Cheung. This person asked about the quotation from Socrates you mentioned just now, and an examined life is not worth living. So the question is, what is an examined life in your philosophy in this modern age?
I think the examined life is that we have to not to take things for granted. We don't thinking about everything that by society, especially nowadays. We are no longer to live in the so-called Western or Eastern or one particular culture, but we have a kind of already kind of global society. We can never think about it. Only one philosophy is correct. So then what I mean examine life is that we have to justify our life. Why are we doing that? Do we have a principles? Do you think that we do think that what we believe, and then this belief well grounded, has well argued, and there's some reason in doing this. Not because I am Chinese, I have to do a Chinese way, or you are a Westerner, you have to do the Western way. No, I think now the modern age, the contemporary age, that we have to take this globalism, the global society at large, and then to see what I'm going to do as one member in this global village. I think that we have to do our own thinking and to seek for our own reflection and our own examination. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Cheung. Anyone else with any comment?
Question from the audience? If not, I have another question from the online participants. It's a question on the third age. The question is the third age really the best stage of life? Nowadays, we have to work until very old. Seniors become lonely. Monies are usually not enough because of inflation, and health is not getting better. So any suggestion of why this is the best age or not?
Well, that was what the medical doctor Christian Northrop said, that it was a good age. And again, as Professor Cheung has indicated over and over again, and I think, first of all, you have to prepare for all your stages in life. So you have to look that this is coming, it is going to happen. So you have to try to save money, and you try to keep your good health. And then you try to examine your life and what is the purpose of it, and try, if you have a purpose, a passion for something, it will yield dividends. And the other thing is, we need to be good citizens, and we need to ask questions of the government to make sure. And in Singapore, we tend to be quite apathetic and accept what is happening, but that is not an examined life. From a societal point of view, we need to examine. We may be comfortable ourselves, but what is happening in the world outside, which is in the world outside, or even in Singapore, is making life difficult for our peers. So the question to that, it's the third age is not pleasant because we haven't prepared for it as individuals and as a society.
I think I will not say that the third age is the best stage of life. I think the first age, second age, the third age are also good and bad age of life. Depends on how we live in this age. But I think one thing, because the awareness of aging is because we are in the third age, we are aware that we have more time, and suddenly we are aware that our body fails us, and then we know that we are aged, and we know we become old. This we self-awareness of the old age happen probably in this third age. Therefore, we are aware of the problem going up in this period. So I said before that we don't know how long it lasts, but at least we know that when if you have our conditions are better, I mean that you don't have the kind of financial problems, we are well supported family, then it might be a best stage of life. It might be, but sometimes as I said, they become probably is a terrible time. You have no money, people your family deserted you, and you become lonely, and maybe this is kind of one of the worst stage of life. So I think that whether it's good or bad depends on how we prepare, and how we and the government and also the individual prepare for this stage.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soin and Prof. Cheung. Any more questions?
Okay, I think in the interest of time, let me ask one last question from the online audience before I wrap this up. Let's take a bit of a risk here, because the theme of each series is about aging, not about death. But I think Prof Cheung mentioned that briefly in his presentation earlier. And again, we have this question from Dr. Ronald Ng again. Death is part of the life cycle, part of the cycle of life. Whether there's a soul or not, we have to learn how to die. So, do you think society should start having sincere conversation about death? Well, I say it's risky because it's not a pleasant topic, but we are talking about aging, and this is last dialogue of the series. Maybe we should explore a little bit of that.
Thank you.
Few words, the Professor Cheung. I think yes, definitely conversations about death are required. And I can't remember where they have places called death cafes. And people get together and they talk about a good death where they prepare. And I think for our third lecture, we had Professor Wong talk about a list of things that we ought to do. So that gives us a guideline. But besides those legal things to do, I think we need to talk much more about death. And if we are much more open about death, then life becomes more enjoyable. And one of the things that I tell myself, I would like to die with as few regrets and as few as few regrets as possible. That's what I would like to. So before I die, I want to try to minimize my regrets so that I have as few regrets as possible. Professor Cheung, the field is for you.
Thank you. I think Dr. Soin already begin my thought by saying that exactly we know about like what CD said, that that is a taboo. No one want to mention about it. But by saying this is a taboo, that means that we are afraid of it. We don't want to think about it. But there is it. Whether we like it or not, death is around. I think when you go back to night in dinner, taking your stick, that is a death from a cow, from a cattle. When we call a fish, once the fish is alive, now it's dead on your table. So death is everywhere. And definitely, so our society have to talk how we think about this problem squarely and openly. And I think only open to our mind to this last, probably maybe this last taboo. With the last century, sex is a much a taboo than death. Now everyone can talk about sex, but death also. Why don't we afraid of death? And because knowing about death, then we had make what Dr. Soin said, make life more enjoyable. We don't have to fear about death. What also Cicero, 2,000 years ago, said we have to face it squarely. So I've been teaching this topic many years, and in fact, my very last postgraduate lectures is on philosophy of dying and aging. So I hope that I may have some time to talk about this and share my thought with you. But in the end, I said that we have to talk, when we talk about aging, that means with the next stage or next stop from aging is dying, is death. We cannot avoid this topic. But whether you like it or not, whether it's a lucky thing to talk about it, and there's different things. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof Cheung. I will, before I hand the floor back to CD, I'd like to just make a little summary or closing. It's hard to condense everything that was done or said, explored in the last 5 sessions. I'd like to thank, first of all, our speakers for being so kind and generous in their sharing today with us, not just from their learned studies, but also from their personal experiences of aging. I teach medical students as well, and we have modules that I do approach. One is called Death and Dying, because they're faced with that in their work, and it's quite harrowing to go through that. Another is called pain and suffering. I know it's very macabre, right? And we often ask, what is a good life? But rarely do we ask, what is a good death? And therefore, we segue into palliative care, giving them comfort, pain relief, and all the things that are associated probably with a good death. And we all want that, right? Quick, painless, with our family around us, hopefully not in a medicalized setting, but at home. So these are all the things that, you know, we should have more conversations about. And the gentleman in our audience was saying he's probably disillusioned with certain things that are being done now. But we could look to other governments, other systems. Japan has a lot of integrated cities where the elderly and the young mix. I know in our satellite towns, they're having kindergartens to go near old age homes so that there's a bit more mixing as well. And in the experience perhaps of the Netherlands and France, I have seen students renting rooms from the more elderly if they've got extra space. I know that is not possible if the people are living in poverty and themselves having to make ends meet. But I think those who do have that, it could be a good way, and also to check on them, because you know, if they're alone and the body is discovered after a few days, it's all very sad, right? So having a human presence, a younger one in the premises, is always a good thing. And I think the questions also about whether there are guidelines, whether it's individual philosophy about death, aging, or is it a grouped one? I think the primal fear of most human beings would be about death. And therefore, our questions on how to alleviate that fear, some of it in believing in life after death, in things where heaven and hell, you know, sort of calm us and give us some purpose and meaning. And we can each find that in our own beliefs. Some are in the parts of organized religion, some are simply very personal. So I think you can take solace from both. And at the end of the day, again, being with friends, family, all the people that will help you in that time, and those of us who may be alone without family, your neighbors, your friends, and all the people around you. I would like to end also on the note that I remember my father saying to me that it's all right to be afraid, but it's also all right to live and imagine each day was going to be your last. So the purpose and meaning that you do, some things that we do are, you know, when we experience burnout and all sorts of things where work is the only thing in life. And we realize, as Dr. Soin said, you know, you have regrets. So if you were to think of each day as your last, what would you choose? What would you do? Yeah. And Prof Cheung also explicited on this topic with all the philosophers, whether it's Stoicism. And if you think of existentialism, Sartre was actually the companion of Simone de Beauvoir that Prof Cheung talks about. Both of them were not married to one another. They were very close because they had a lot of sharing at the intellectual level as well as compatibility, but they were married to other people or lived with other people. So another model, a very Western model perhaps, and not suitable to our Asian societies. So a lot of food for thought. I thank you all for your presence today and your interest in the series. I hand over the floor to CD to close this lovely aging series. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maleena, for the very nice conclusion. As the organizer of this series of talk, I'm also very glad that today's session actually ties all the session together, right? Because you know, just now we talk about how to remain socially engaged, right, in order to have a meaningful life at the third age. In fact, it was talked about in the first session by Dr. 𝗂𝗁𝗂𝗁𝗂, the importance of having good mental health while you're aging by, staying socially connected, right? We also talk about things like getting prepared, because if you want to have the crystallized intelligence that Dr. Soin talked about, you have to be prepared, right? Because we retired at the age of around 60s. If you live to 80, 90, there are 30 years of, living purposeful life, right? If what Prof Cheung told us is true, you have to have a purpose in life, then you better be prepared for it and accumulate your crystallized intelligence, right? So that you can actually do what you're supposed to do, with a longer life. Yeah. So again, I'm glad that all this come together in a nice conclusion using philosophy as a framework. I also like to thank our 4 times moderator, Dr. Maleena, for helping us to moderate all the sessions and tying all this nicely together. Yeah. Also, thank you for the audience. Thank you, audience, for being staying with us. Some of you might have missed 1 or 2 of the session. We have all the sessions recorded. It's on our website and also on YouTube channel. So I hope you have a chance to go and look at them. I just look at the views on the YouTube channel. I see a lot of views. I think when you have a chance to put all this together, I think we put together something helpful for many people. But like what Maleena just said, or Dr. Prof Cheung also mentioned, these are topics we have to continue to explore and discuss among ourselves to find the better way to help each other, as we age. Again, thank you for being with us. Thank you for attending our series. We'll keep you posted on our next series if you have any other talks. Meanwhile, we're getting towards the end of a year, and we have opened up again after 2 or 3 long years of COVID. So I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you a happy holiday season as well. Thank you.